Welcome everybody to unit number 10 of your supply chain management. This is the last week. I'm sure you're not looking forward to it. You want more of it, but sorry, this is the last one. So anyways, let's start today with world-class procurement in order for it to enhance the business performance. So for this one, let's talk about first at innovation and supplier continuous improvement. So here we're talking about uh, how to build that relationship. How a world-class procurement is about building strong, long-lasting relationships based on continuous improvement. Meaning, I will look at after your processes, and I will look after mine, and together we're going to improve them. We will find a systematic process of I check your quality, I check your processes, and move forward for us to benchmark against the best practices in the industry. So, in order for this to happen, we need to have we need procurement specialists, and that means not just your basic procurement officers that you have there. You have to hire the best ones. You have to go and search for the industry who are the benchmarking setters, and based on them, pull them to your company. For this one, we also have procurement needs commercial imagination. So we need to think of how to do things better, how to change things around. So we're gonna look here, for example, in this unit about Lush. That's a company, Lush and the Body Shop, that they are looking to do products in a very different way, trying to bring value to the consumer in a very different way. So we're looking forward to it. So you will see how they do it. So in this case, like I said, you need imagination how to rebrand the product, reconfigure the whole supply chain, and make it more efficient, more effective, and add value to every single player in the supply chain. So in this case, the procurement must convince stakeholders that procurement will have a positive impact on innovation. So whenever we have a good procurement process brings innovation, like I said, it changes completely the whole strategy. So we have to think of that. And of course, the organization must be prepared to invest in this product or service research and development. So changing the whole supply chain is not cheap. It requires a lot of investment in terms of financial investment, and even more investment in terms of change, of transformational change in the company. So transforming into a world-class procurement is not easy. It requires a very strategic plan and changing it over the years. This is the case, for example, of New Balance. Many of you wear the shoes New Balance. They had to do a complete change of their whole supply chain to be competitive one more time. So here in Korea, probably like 3-4 years ago, more or less 5 years ago, there was an increased use of New Balance shoes. No, it was like a fashion, but this change, this shift in fashion was possible because they changed their supply chain and the whole process, the way they do it, right? So there we can see a good example. Also in this video, we have a video of L'Oreal, the world-class procurement. We can see also how they do it. Nope. So very good. So let's continue. Let's talk about the procurement and engineering. So in this case, we have to think that procurement has to re-engineer all the processes of the company. So re-engineer the whole process of the company, and also re-engineer the products as well, and the manufacturing process as well. So in this case, when we decide to do this, we have to have an early involvement of suppliers in the design process, because the suppliers are going to tell us what are the benefits of their products or what are the limitations of their products, so we can maximize, and also we can understand whether there's going to be any delays or what are the possible risks in general. In this case, we can challenge specifications also, because in the end, when we change to a world-class procurement, that means that the specifications of the product are going to change. We're going to use better products or more environmental friendly or what kind of change are we gonna do? We also will include obligations for replacing faulty materials in the contract. So also we have to establish a program of what we're gonna do, because we are stepping up our production. So we have to make sure that there's quality all the time. So what's going to happen with that? We have to provide training in cost drivers. So what are the main problems and the main costs that we have throughout the company? So we have to make sure that we train the staff in understanding them what increases our cost. What kind of defects, what kind of quality issues are causing us trouble. Then we have put a rigorous risk assessment in place. We have to understand what are the main drivers of risk and how we mitigate them. It's not just identifying them, but also understanding how we can fix them. We also have to network with other organizations, because we have to understand how they're going to help us throughout this process. And mostly we have to overcome cross-functional team barriers. So that means that when we decide to do world-class procurement, it's gonna open. The company's gonna fully open. There's no divisions between departments. Everybody knows about everything. And that's the case, for example, when we start to use ERPs, because everybody knows information about other departments, and also we know information about the suppliers as well. So in this case, all the processes start to interact with each other, and the communication flows back and forth. So now we have special design considerations. So in this case, when we're going to change the supply chain, we have to think of how we're going to make the materials the most effective. So in terms of which materials are more effective, have less waste, which materials produce more efficiency in terms of quality, which products perhaps are more environmental friendly. The same thing as the packaging, which one lasts longer and taking care of the environment, and which products which supplies are less toxic. So we start to think in many ways of how the design is going to be connected with the qualities, the features of the certain products or supplies that we're going to be using. So now we have, in order for us to be a world-class procurement, we have to develop that strong relationship with our supplier. So in this process, what we have to do is, first of all, we need to identify critical products. What are those products that in our production line are critical? Because of cost or because they are major components of our production? We need to understand who are the critical suppliers, who are those suppliers that we need to have a good relationship with them, because either they are the sole supplier or they are one of the main suppliers, or perhaps that drive our cost higher or lower. We have to understand their performance. We have to assess how they are performing throughout the delivery, throughout the quality, etc. We have to determine the gap between what we want them to supply and how we want them to supply it, and how they actually can supply it, whether it's because of time, whether it's because of quality, or if there's any other environmental issues that we want them to fix them. So we have to assess, we want them to operate at 100%, but they are only able to deliver at 60% or 80%. So in this case, we go to number 7, and we have to agree how we're going to bridge those gaps, right? How we're going to make sure that they deliver to the quality that I want, or the time that I want, and the goals that I'm willing to achieve in order to be a world-class procurement. So that means we have to form cross-functional supplier development team. We send them people there, they send people here. We see how they do things, so we tell them what to change, and they send people here, so they see how we do things, so they understand. It's not the same thing that I go and tell you, well, we have some problems in the production, and you go in there and see the actual problems in the production. You see, okay, these employees, or this production line is taking very long time, maybe because it's not maximized, maybe the flow of it, so they have to change the flow in order to be more productive. Or the same thing, they come to our company and they say, well, okay, these guys are producing on their very high quality standards and we are not producing at the same level. So what kind of changes we have to do? And of course, we have to set deadlines for achieving these improvements. If this improvement is going to happen progressively over the next 6 months or 1 year, or it has to be automatic, and we have to think of that. And then we have to monitor those improvements over time to see whether they are working or not. And that brings us to the procurement research. We have to systematically gather information of who are the suppliers, the performance of them, the problems that we have either externally or internally, and how to fix them. And why is it important to really do an intensive research of who are the suppliers and the problems underlying that supply chain? So we have to, the more we understand our supply chain and our suppliers, if there's any changes in the environment, we can react to them. So we can be more agile. So that works very well. Same thing, a procurement done in conditions of uncertainty like COVID-19. When we understand the whole chain, we can shift supply chain. We have problems because we source this product from abroad, from this country, so we have to perhaps source it locally, or we have to find a way to do it. The same thing we have electronically. We can, when we research so much information, now we have electronic systems or electronic data processing that can process a lot of information of different suppliers, the suppliers that we have, and we can do a great analysis out of it. Now the softwares are very smart, and so we can identify with the softwares which products are not coming on time, or which products are not performing well, or which supplies are causing problems in our production line. So the same thing, we can focus on partnering or outsourcing. We understand which functions we can delegate to someone else and which functions we can do it by ourselves, where we just need to do partnering, or where we need to do acquisitions of other companies in order for us to be virtually integrated or vertically integrated. In this case also we have to think that we can do e-procurement, which is, we understand if we are able to map our own production, we can implement e-procurement systems such as an ERP, and that means we can also connect that process to a supplier, and then understand in real time the production timings, the production times, and then for us as well, based on the production times, we will set out our production deadlines. Okay, very good. So now let's go to the next one. So in this case, we have to set a procurement performance evaluation. So in this case, we have to determine how efficient, whether they are meeting the standards and the goals that we're setting up. But this varies a lot between companies because there's no rule on this. No, for example, for some companies that focus on high quality, the performance comes in terms of the quality of the materials and the timing. For some other focuses on the price, whether I am getting those supplies at the cheapest price as we expected before. So different companies will have different measurements of the evaluation. If, for example, for the ISO, if they start to realize that their supply starts to get much more expensive, they'll cut the suppliers because the performance is not there. So, and that brings together the procurement audits, which is, first of all, when we have a world-class procurement, means we develop a relationship with the supplier, and I tell the supplier, can I go to your facilities and inspect what you're doing and systematically check your processes, your documentation, everything, and see whether you are working under the standards that I want or not. So in this case, that's, for example, the case of Nike. Nike has faced a lot of problems when it comes to audits. They systematically don't audit their outsourcing company. So they have some sweatshops in Malaysia, in India, and they work on their very poor conditions. So when Nike is asked about that, they say, "Oh, we just hired them. We don't know anything about it." But the face of Nike says that they are very ethical and they are very good about it, but the reality it is not. So this is when it comes a discrepancy between the world-class procurement, because you don't set audits, they don't know the working conditions of that supplier, right? Of course, Nike doesn't care about it because in the end, these sweatshops they pay $1 per day to the employee. If that's it. So for them, is like they just want cheap supplies. They don't want ethical supplies, and that is when things become different. So if you want, look at for example, in one of the next slides, we are taking a look at the video of the body shop and how they do their ethical procurement from Africa, from some of the African communities. So this can only be done because they do audits of their suppliers. They go and check them and they ensure that the processes are done according to what they agree initially. So another problem is that sometimes suppliers are not very ethical and they don't agree to these audits. So it's like, yes, I can do an agreement with you, but I don't let you come to my facilities. So there's already tricky there, and that's something that we need to be aware of. Then the ethics are not really working there very well. And so we need to talk about benchmarking. So when we're talking about world-class procurement, is we need to set standards. What kind of standards? We can set internal standards to see internally as a company, how are we working the flow, what are our goals, how we measure them, and when do we need to meet those key performance indicators. Now, in the functional benchmarking is there are some specific functions that we want them to perform at the highest level. So in this case, we can compare them to the external companies, just as specific functions, not as a company. In internal benchmarking, usually we are just assessing ourselves against ourselves, whether we're meeting those ones. Functional benchmarking already is some functions against external processes. Then we look at competitive benchmarking, which is how competitors are doing in that industry. Or it can be other industries as well, and see whether we can match those standards or not. And then we have strategic benchmarking, which is we have partners, and then with those partners, we are performing according to their standards, or they are performing against our standards. So we try to match each other, right? So in this case, we're working with suppliers of any component, let's say for a computer, and then in this case, they are working at the same level as us, or they have better processes than us. So we go and see how they do it. So we try to match them. So we were talking about ethics earlier today. So ethics in procurement is very critical. There's very often abuse in the supply chain. Abuse the suppliers because we pay them less for what they're producing in order to make more profit, or because there's hidden information. There's parts of the process that are not disclosed. So being unethical in the supply chain is very easy, because in the end we can commit to something in order to get the contract, but once the contract is done, we're gonna do it our way. So that's definitely something that shouldn't happen. So we have to see the supply chain process as a fair process. Here you can see, for example, one of the companies that has a very good corporate social responsibility is Body Shop. And they have a lot of ethical programs in terms of sourcing of their material. So you can see how they are trying their best to source in the most ethical way their supplies, from some African communities, like as I mentioned earlier. So, and ethics, that doesn't mean environment. Ethics means in every business practice. And then we're going to jump into environmental procurement policies. So in this case, we're going to talk about here, for example, you can look at the environmental policy of Lush. I think that one will summarize all these steps 1 to 9. which is mostly about, if you're gonna have an environmental policy, you have to make it very clear, you have to implement it, everybody needs to know about it, you need to train employees about it, and you have to make sure that's regular audits to fulfill it. So in this case, for example, Lush is doing that. They said, we're gonna be environmental friendly, and we're gonna make sure at every stage of the process it happens, and we measure it. We have our own benchmarks, internal benchmarks. We have external ones in terms of the suppliers, and we're gonna make sure that everything works. But everybody is aware of it. They train their employees very strong into that, and they make sure it happens. So an environmental policy is not something that happens by accident. It needs very strong planning, and you have to live and die for it. If you're going to go into this direction, a company has to live and die for it. Rather, it is not something that you commit partially just to make profit. Here, for example, the case of Tums. Tums, they claim to be very ethical and very environmental friendly and etc. But the problem is that some African communities complain that they come and give, I mean, the policies, buy one shoe and will give shoe to a poor community. But apparently that doesn't work very well, because some African communities are well, like for example, some shoe retailers in those countries get highly affected by these Tums that just come and gives away free shoes. But anyways, that's another example. So anyways, again, environmental policies need to be very clear, and it's a program that needs to be really well thought, like the case of Lush. So go and watch a video. I'd rather you skip all my nonsense and just watch the video, because in the end it really depicts the reality of how to set up this kind of programs. So with that, we're done. We're done for the semester. I appreciate you watching all my videos, and well, I'll see you hopefully one day. Thank you so much, and I'll see you. Bye bye.